These days, the LAPD is on an offensive to prevent crime. Its latest weapon is a computer program that can actually predict where crimes will happen.
These crime prediction boxes come from the same kind of mathematical calculation used to predict earthquakes and aftershocks.
Welcome to the future, folks. Police are getting closer to predicting crime using an algorithm. The system tracks and pinpoints crimes up to the minute, then spits out detailed maps, daily forecasts, showing where new crimes are most likely to crop up.
The main aim of the Congress is to discuss how can our physical body evolve and how can consciousness evolve. It is very important because now we are facing the time where unconscious evolution period has almost finished, and we come to the new period of controlled human evolution can happen. I think that main efforts of their scientists and main technological progress will be concentrated on their making new body for the human being.
You're listening to Canary Cry Radio. Now here are your hosts, Basil and Gonz.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Canary Cry Radio. If you're tuning in from Twitter, Facebook, or found your way through YouTube or Revelations Radio Network or your RSS feed, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate your attention right now. And if you didn't tune in from Twitter, or Facebook, or YouTube, make sure to go follow us on Twitter at Canary Cry Radio, or Facebook, just search for Canary Cry Radio.
Yeah.
Do it.
All right.
Busted that one out.
Yeah, that was awesome. Well, that was Basil, and this is Gonz, and a little tired, been up for a while, but, things are good. What am I supposed to talk about here? All right. Guests, that's right, yeah. We're going to have some guests. There's a couple people who have asked us about having guests, and I have emailed some people, and they are totally willing to come on, and so we will have guests in the future. We just Basil and I just pretty much have to get organized enough to
scheduling issue.
Yeah, to make things happen. So stay tuned for that. We will definitely have people on, and that's part of something we plan to do, but we wanted to kind of establish, what we're about before we jump into having other guests and stuff like that. So,
right.
Yeah. And also with the last episode, we talked about Dave's story, his ghost pictures. And he sent me a couple more pictures that he wanted me to post. So what we're going to do is just to update the last post from the last episode from Canary Cry Radio, episode 4. And in the show notes, we will put some of those pictures in there so you guys can check them out. And
some more things to mull over when you're thinking about the ghost stories over on episode 4 there.
Yeah.
So I think we're just going to get right into it. I don't know who has heard about this or have been seeing some of the stories on this, but it is a little thing called predictive policing. And that's something that you all probably just thought of the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise and the
psychics in the goo.
Exactly, the gooey psychics. If you have not seen the movie, go watch it. It's a good movie. And it definitely explains some of the problems with predictive policing. Here's the rundown. LAPD started doing this a little while ago, and I guess a few other communities are starting to check it out. But what it is a program, an analytic program that has compiled data from past crimes throughout the city and sort of lays them out on a map and points out what are called hotspots. And I'm sure you all can figure out what these mean. And what they're trying to do is place assets, in their words, or cops, in my words.
5 O's.
5 O's. Where the crime will be before it happens. All right? It sounds like a perfectly innocent thing, and I'm sure it is an innocent thing, but there are obviously some some big problems with this. Now let's take a step back. On a website called policechiefmagazine.org. This is well, it's exactly what its name says it is. It's a magazine, online magazine about all sorts of policing things, and you can go check it out. There's some interesting stuff, but
Total Recall Corporation. Just reading some advertisements on the site there.
Yeah, so go check it out if you're into that, I guess. But anyways, so they have this really long article on predictive policing, and I guess this is just a big thing that they're really trying to push and figure out. I'm going to start out by saying this article is just torture to read, and not because it's poorly written, but because they had some wordsmith go through and just babble in just the most complex language that you can think.
I think there's 30 paragraphs and about 16 references that are made in this little article here.
Exactly. It is such a complicated piece of literature. And the words used, the language used is so much more complex than it needs to be. I mean, you read this thing and you're reading it, and I mean, over and over and over, you're hearing phrases like, oh my gosh, let me see here, analysis and tactical strategy planning and multi-jurisdictional collaborative assets, evolving from comprehensive computer statistics accountability, enabling police practitioners or something. It's basically 30 paragraphs of just a thesaurus vomited onto this page. Okay, that's enough bashing the thing.
We should back off on that.
I'm sure the writer's a really nice guy. But my point is, when you start to read this thing, you start to notice you're just reading the same thing over and over and over. And they make it sound so complicated and so complex and so advanced that you sort of get lost in this headspace of like, oh man, this is really some high-tech stuff. But let me tell you, if you do some more research, basically they just take some records from the past and they put it into a Google Maps thing, and it just points out where the hot spots have been in the past. All right, so that's what it is.
And it predicts kind of where a crime might occur.
Yes, what it's meant to do is show hotspots where crimes will be occurring, and so where you can put your assets, quote unquote, or cops, in order to prevent any sort of crime. And like I said, it sounds like a perfectly innocent thing. That's great. I'm all about preventing crime. Don't get me wrong. But what's wrong with what's happening is it makes me very uncomfortable in the sense that now you have a cop or cops rolling through, and some of these spaces are like 500 feet by 500 feet. They can be very small areas. Now you have cops who are already on edge. As we've seen before, cops are now trained to act as if everything is a life and death situation. That is a common police practice now, which is already a dangerous thing and has caused so much trouble for a lot of police departments. And it's just not safe having people with guns on edge all the time. But now you have them rolling through 500-foot stretches of neighborhood, just expecting something to go wrong.
Right.
And I mean, you can imagine if this one area is known as a hot spot for home break-ins or something like that. Well, you have these cops, rolling down the street, and there's a guy on a ladder cleaning out his gutters. Well, it's just these cops will be now so on edge that as they see a guy on a ladder trying to get on the roof, and it automatically turns into a home break-in situation. Like you can just imagine the sort of paranoia that this is going to be creating. Now, like I said, it's not that the whole predictive policing thing is necessarily I'll say it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea. But I can see how it's a natural progression into what they're trying to do.
Well, they should have kind of checks and balances. They should have ways to, and I'm sure to some degree they already have this, where yes, there is a potential of a crime, but scan the area, use your judgment, don't just assume that whatever's going on is a crime. I mean, I don't know to what extent. I didn't read the whole thing, the whole 300 paragraphs of this article, but does it mention anything like that in there, or is it just kind of
Right. Well, of course they explain, like, of course these cops are briefed and they're supposed to be trained to be thinking clear-headedly and things like that. But really the truth is that is not always the case. Now, another issue with this that I see is now that the public knows that this is happening, I mean, the smart criminals are just going to go to other places that aren't hotspots, because we know that the cops are going to be, or the assets are going to be focused on these hotspots.
right?
And the whole reason for this is because budget cuts, things like this, they're trying to do more with less of a police force.
Yeah.
All right. Which, again, I'm not blaming these guys for this. I'm just saying. Now, so we know there's less cops. Now we know that they're all going to be pinpointed on these hotspots. Well, if I'm a smart criminal, I'm just going to go to something that I know isn't a hotspot.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's just so much wrong with it. And in my experience and in my opinion, it's just naturally going to be putting, it's just going to be causing problems with innocent people. And that's something that I really do have a problem with. I mean, we already have harassment, and whether we like it or not, racism does exist in the United States. And there are things like this going on. And this is just going to be another level to the whole contention between the public and the police. And I just see it as a big problem. Now, we talk about the movie Minority Report, and it's funny because everywhere you look trying to research this stuff, you see they reference Minority Report.
Always.
Every single time. And it's funny because Minority Report was about why this doesn't work. Okay. Yeah. And so you read it, for instance, on the Police Chief magazine. In 2002 movie, Minority Report may create the impression that predictive analytics will be used to target individuals inappropriate for future crimes or bad acts that they may commit but have not. It is important to note predictive policing and any public safety resource or tool must be used legally and ethically. Oh, yeah, because, I mean, every time the cops take action, it's always legal and it's always ethical, right? The analytical methods used in predictive policing model do not identify specific individuals. Rather, they surface a particular times and locations predicted to be associated with increased likelihood of crime. Okay, we get it. All right, it's just so obvious that of course we don't think that you're picking a single person out. It seems like, now, I'm a communication major, and so I understand what they're doing here. You pick out where somebody might try to make a point against you, and then you make an argument about it before they can even get to it. But what happens here is it's not even the problem. They just bring it up
right.
Because that's what the movie was about.
Right.
Okay, we don't even it's insulting to me that he thinks that I think that they're going after individuals. I know they're not going after individuals.
Right.
And you think about, what are these hotspots going to be? I mean, the hotspots are going to be urban. I mean, most likely ethnic.
Inner cities, gangs,
the things, the places that cops should already be, or not should, but are already there.
Yeah.
It's not like cops haven't known about hotspots.
Yeah.
That's another thing that blows my mind is they think that this is, oh, now we know hotspots because we have put records into a computer. You should already know what the hotspots are.
Yeah. The one thing that really jumped out at me in this article was this, they go on and on about this intelligent-led policing, and they call it ILP. And the author of this article just clearly states it can be traced back to a single event, the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the United States. And so it's just another way of another step in what is happening to this country because of what happened in 9/11. And Minority Report came out in 2002, if I'm not mistaken, right? So right after the whole September 11th thing,
Right.
and it's just, I don't know. There's just, my conspiracy brain just goes off when I read stuff like that.
Exactly. It's directly related to 9/11. Now, taking that step, we can take a look at another thing.
The pre-crime stuff?
The more pre-crime stuff, the DHS documents on FAST. It's called FAST, F-A-S-T, Future Attribute Screening Technology. Now, this goes along the same lines, people. So it's about predicting and stopping crime before it happens. But the problem is the Department of Homeland Security is looking at it at an individual level. Let me read you just a few things here about what they're looking at. A remote cardiovascular and respiratory sensor to measure heart rate and respiration, which allows for the calculation of heart rate variability, respiration rate, and respiratory sinus arrhythmia. 2. A remote eye tracker, which is a device that uses a camera and processing software to track the position and gaze of the eyes, and in some instances, the entire head of a subject. Most eye trackers will also provide a measurement of pupil diameter. So now we're looking at people's heart rates, and now we're looking at their breathing, and now we're looking at literally where they are looking with their eyes and the diameter of their pupils. Now, we have thermal cameras that provide detailed information on the changes in thermal properties of the skin and the face that will help assess electrodermal activity and measure respiration and the eye movements. A high-resolution video that allows for highly detailed images of the face and body to be taken so that image analysis can determine facial features and expressions and body movements. An audio system for analyzing human voice for pitch change. And other sensor types such as pheromone detection are also under consideration. So basically what we have here is a system.
Technology.
Yeah, exactly. A technological system put together to look at an individual in a crowd and figure out if they are basically about to commit a crime. Okay. Now, we've seen this in movies before. All right. I mean, we've seen the TV shows. I think it's Lie to Me, where he can look at people's faces and how they're acting and see what they're going to do or whatever. And the eye trackers, I mean, we saw that in Minority Report, the cardiovascular respiratory sensors and everything like that. This is all stuff that we've seen before in movies.
Yeah.
Well, now they're trying to actually apply it in real life to pre-crime establishments. Now, the biggest problem that I have with this is it's so fun to watch in movies. It is really fun to watch in movies because they're always looking at the bad guy. You know, you can always see the bad guy, and he's always the one getting caught by this.
Right.
But there's just so much wrong with the system. If you're familiar with this or not, there's things called hard sciences, and there are things called soft sciences. Hard sciences are math, physics, things like that. Soft sciences, biology, psychology, sociology. Well, what are the things that this is using? This system is looking at biology, looking at your respiratory rate, looking at everything else. It's looking at psychology, like looking at your eyes and your face and things like that. And sociology, they're looking at you in a crowd of people and how you act. This is a system based on the three soft sciences, the sciences that you cannot always duplicate the same results.
Yeah,
that's the whole point about them.
Yeah, and definitely it's basically a giant lie detector test that scans people in a crowd or in a large area. And I understand kind of the way you want to implement something like this in a large crowd situation. But, you know, an example of how this cannot work is, you know, for example, I mean, an airport. An airport's a really good example, because say you're in line to get on an airplane, you haven't been on an airplane in a very long time, or never before. You get closer and closer to a checkpoint, or the place where you got to move your luggage, and you start getting nervous, and your heart rate goes up, and you kind of start, your body temperature rises, your eyes kind of do whatever, all these things that are signals, quote unquote, for, pre-criminal activity.
Right.
And, the police pull you aside, or, run out and grab you, whatever happens. I don't know what the procedures are, but.
Exactly. Then you're a target and you get pulled out of the line, and then you miss your plane because you were nervous about it.
Right.
And just think if people knew that they were being scanned. I mean, and knew that it was possible. It's
going to make it worse.
It just stresses everybody out.
Yeah. And one thing that is interesting too is that if and again, I'm not a big Facebook guy, but I heard recently that to sign on to Facebook, you have to it forces you to kind of pick or identify some of your friends or something. I don't know if you've had to deal with that or not, but if you have, it's quite possible that, some of the database for this kind of technology is being rounded up through things like Facebook, where there are pictures of people's faces and, whatnot, where, basically by identifying it, you're confirming who these people are for this database. And, we've talked about the Utah database, and where they can collect all this data. It's quite possible that they're just, gathering all this information, having, because obviously we're just a number to the elite, we're just a social security number. So,
Well, right. And another thing is, I just got my driver's license redone a little while ago, and they took a facial scan of me, and I had to look into this thing, and I couldn't smile, and they actually scanned my face, and it made me.
Wow.
I mean, you can guess out there that would make me uncomfortable, and I was very uncomfortable with that. But I mean, I couldn't drive without it, and so it's just things like that, and I mean, going back to the FAST, the future attribute screening technology, is I mean, people like agoraphobics or something who are generally going to be nervous in crowds or whatever, or you just have people. I mean, there's just so many flaws with it. I mean, we probably don't even need to talk about it anymore. It's so obvious, demonstrably flawed. System just in concept, not even in execution yet. Because they are testing it in certain places. They have admitted that they're testing it not in airports, but something like that. And so it's happening right now.
Yeah, and I think they in that instance about where they have tested this FAST technology, and I think it was, I can't remember what, CNET or somebody asked the DHS directly, like, where have you guys tested this? And the DHS basically responded like, oh, we're doing it in the public. We're doing it in an undisclosed location in the public. And, they kind of poked a little harder, like, really? You're doing it without knowing, without the public knowing about it? And the DHS came back with, oh, no, we're using volunteers. So
yeah,
it's kind of a mixed story there that they're, so who knows? It could be happening to you at a bank, or, who knows?
I know. Well, exactly. And the thing is, they talk about how it's in preliminary stages of research, and there are no plans. Well, I mean, this is actually their exact quote. I'm reading it. Is only in preliminary stages of research, and there are no plans for acquiring or deploying this type of technology at this time. Okay, so at this time, while you're researching it, there's no time. Like, there's no. Thank you for telling me that. Like, it's just okay. So when you finish the research, how about then? Then where are you going to put it? And I mean, it's not even a question that needs to be answered. Obviously, it's going to be in airports and things like that. It's going to be all over.
Airports, stadiums, concerts, things like that. All sorts of things, that the places where large crowds gather. And I think there was a YouTube video that I watched that I don't think I linked to, but basically it was a DHS promo type of video that came out a year or so ago that basically did this experiment where they had people, and basically what the DHS was promoting was like this mobile, I don't know what to call it, like a station that you can set up in anywhere, any public location where people walk through it, and they asked people to, purposely smuggle things and, just tested their, what happens to them physiologically, to see if the system can catch those people.
Right.
So, I mean, those were controlled tests, but I'm sure that they are trying to somehow test it on a larger scale in a more, a more real life situation. So
Right. Well, I mean, that's exactly the thing. And sure, you can test people you give something to smuggle and play your little war games.
Right.
But when you take it into a public place, and not only do you may have criminals, you may not, but you have people who are having problems and they are living their lives.
Right.
I mean, you have somebody who is in a fight with their wife, or they just found out they're cheating on them, and these physiological things are happening. And now, on top of being cheated on and divorced, they're getting pulled aside because they think they're some sort of criminal
about to commit a crime.
Exactly. It's a pre-crime nightmare.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just one more time in summation, is that, it makes sense to try to stop crime before it happens. It makes sense. I get it. But it's just the basis of what this is happening is so mushy. It's just like taking a couple balls of Play-Doh, smushing it together, and calling it a security system. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's just for the exact reason that it's going off of just these soft sciences that you cannot predict at 100%.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that is going to be important to talk about with this topic is how are we going to respond as people, as a community, as people of, just as part of this nation and this world. How do we respond to something like this? Because the way technology is developing, and we didn't mention at the top of the show what we're talking about with on the show, which basically, obviously, the first thing is the whole preventative crime thing. But secondly, we're going to talk about some of this transhumanist stuff that's going on with this last conference. But how are we going to respond when these technologies become so ingrained into our society? It's going to change the way we behave. This is basically a panopticon. And if you don't know what a panopticon is, essentially what it is a physical panopticon is where you have a central location where a shooter or a gunman is stationed, and all around are basically prison cells. And the prison cell can see the tower in the center, but they can't see where the shooter is coming from. So essentially what happens is people are going to start policing themselves. And when that happens, that's basically taking away our freedoms, just our public freedoms at least, and private too in some regard. But
well, right. What exactly this is going to do, and I think may be a part of the larger picture. I mean, these are smart people. I'm sure they realize that they are working with some very shaky science here.
Yeah.
But the biggest part about it, and the really sinister part about it, when you think about it, is that what they're doing is they're creating a culture that you must live in fear. You're going to be walking on eggshells wherever you go, even if, it kind of reminds me of the movie Equilibrium, where now you have, when you go out in public, you have to make sure not to be upset about your wife cheating on you. You have to make sure not to be too emotional about something, because it's going to start setting off sensors and it's going to bug you. They're gonna come get you. So it'll kind of force you while you're in public to kind of have to be emotionless, which is like that movie Equilibrium.
Yeah.
And who knows? What's better for a tyrannical government than a population that, when they're all out in public together, they're forcing themselves to stifle their emotions?
Yeah. Well,
You know what I mean? It's just this whole thing turns into a spider web. Everything is connected. And that's one of the things that a lot of people aren't understanding when I tell them about, like this, the DHS thing. They say, well, that's really bad. That's crazy. But did you hear about this other conspiracy thing or whatever? Well, it's like they're all connected. It's all part of creating this world that is controlled. It's all about controlling you, not only controlling your physical body or your actions, but controlling your thoughts, controlling your emotions, and controlling your fears.
Yeah, and this is interesting too, because this is a very strictly fear-based system that is, police are there to protect you, but it's just a different psychological thing when you are when you know that you're being watched. It just is. I think, I know, Basil, you're in a band. I don't know if you've played in front of people,
Right.
and I've been in a band before, and it's just different when you practice and when you actually step on a stage and you're in front of like a bunch of people. It's just there's a psychological thing that happens. There's and so.
Well, and I'm sure if this fast system was looking at me on stage, it would definitely think I was about to do something terrible.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just the physical response is exactly
the
what they're talking
adrenaline
about.
and everything else that's going off in your body, the pheromones.
The pheromones.
So so I think, if anything, this is a topic that you definitely want to
Yeah,
don't be
absolutely.
a downer about it, but just bring it up, talk to people about it, let them know that this kind of stuff is going on, and so that, at the very least, people are able to kind of at least mentally prepare and spiritually prepare for this kind of thing that ultimately, if this is what's happening now, I mean, think about what our children are going to be faced with in a decade, a couple decades. It's just going to be a completely different world.
Well, exactly. I mean, and the way I like to look at it, and I think I've mentioned this before, is when talking to people who aren't quite keyed into this and aren't quite open to it, I find it important to let them know, because when it does start happening, and it does, there will be incrementally more evidence for you to give them and more things for them to look at, that they can look back and they'll be like, yeah, I remember you told me about that really gnarly security thing, and now it's happening, and what else do you have to say? Can you clue me in with some other stuff, please? And if nothing else, that's what needs to be happening with your family, with your friends, and things like that, because if they're not open to it now, they need to be open to it when it starts to count. And that's where just sharing with them, even in a non-threatening way, just give them the facts, give them these articles to look at, and just talk to them about it.
Yeah, and when stuff starts to happen, it won't be a surprise to a lot of us, but
right,
at the very least, we will have prepared for a long time, actually, at least talked about it, thought about things, and we will be that person that the community of friends and whatnot can turn to, and just at the very least, what else, like you said, what else do you know? What can we do about it? And obviously, there's not a whole lot we can do about it, but
right.
Yeah.
And just so everybody knows, make sure to check the show notes. We'll post all the videos and all the sources for you to check out. We'll post the Police Chief magazine, and you can just have a bunch of fun with that one.
Let us know if you get through all 47 paragraphs of
it's pretty gnarly, but
it's awesome. So is there anything else you want to touch on that, or?
I think we're good. We'll jump back and we'll try to make some connections if we have to, but I think we can move on.
Yeah, and I think this next topic definitely will play a part in some of this policing stuff that we've been talking about. But
right.
So basically, the topic here is it's transhumanism as kind of a general consensus, but
we love our transhumanism.
Just keeping you guys informed about what's going on out there with this whole movement. And in February, there was a big conference in Russia, in Moscow. It was called the Global Future 2045 Congress.
I love how it's in Moscow. That just makes it
Well, it's
so
going to
much
be in
more awesome.
It's going to be in New York next year, so it'll be.
Is.
I think for the people in the know here, I think we can start talking about this stuff because it's gonna hit the U.S. next year big time. I think when they come to New York, it's going to be a big deal. So
Right.
I just get the feeling that this is just a preview of what's to come, at least in the States.
Absolutely.
But basically, what they did was they had a conference, and they brought people from all sorts of fields of cognitive sciences, robotics, but it wasn't just about the sciences. They actually came together to talk, philosophy, to talk sociology, how it changes the planetary civilization in light of this, rapid change of technological development. One of the things that they talked about was discussing, and this is a quote here, discussing strategic problems arising in a dynamically changing world and the potential for the appearance of a global or cosmic mode of thinking. And they had tons of speakers and workshops. They had the world's leading physicists, biologists, anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists, all the soft sciences, philosophers, as well as specialists in fields of big history, robotics, brain-computer interface, neurosciences, space technology. And so, all these heady people getting together talking about the future of mankind in light of the advanced technologies and sciences. And really, the topic was human enhancement, the transhumanist agenda or hopes. And I just pulled out, I dug through a lot of these speakers. I didn't go through every single one. There was a lot of them, but I went through some of the ones that are probably more well known or just had profound titles to their speeches. And some of them were videos and some of them were transcribed. And I picked out 6 people and I picked out quotes. And so we can stop and comment on various ones as we go through here, but they're very interesting, and I hope to just kind of shed light of what's going on out there. So the first guy is his name's Dmitry Itskov. He is the general chair and founder of this global future 2045 Congress event, and he's also the president of New Media Stars. He's a Russian dude, and in his talk, he basically wants to attain human immortality by the year 2045. I mean, he really thinks that this is possible. And he laid out his kind of agenda of how this is going to happen. He really thinks that cybernetic engineering is going to be the kind of the stepping stone for this to happen. And actually, the introduction to today's show, the second half of the introduction, the first half is like, policing quotes. But the second half was by this guy, Itskov. And he basically thinks that the next change, because we've been changing our environment for so long, for so many centuries, we've been, the Industrial Revolution, all these different discoveries and advancements in technology and science have all been external or environmental. But now we have acquired the ability to change us from the inside, change the human. It's time to actually evolve the human. And so that's kind of the basis of where they're coming from. And they want to cybergenically engineer and fix the human body and advance it. And so one of the biggest ways that he thinks this is going to happen is, first off, by reverse engineering the human brain. And what he believes is that by doing this, we're going to be able to upload our consciousness into different machinery, different ethers, and the internet. And we've touched on this in the past, but more on the sociological or kind of sociological side of things. Global side of things. Also, he thinks that a healthy competition between nations in developing this technology is going to actually help, because his point is that unlike in the past where there was an arms race, between, because he's Russian, he's talking about the U.S., between U.S. and Russia, we had these this arms race type thing going on,
Space race,
all these things. And space race was kind of oh, my voice kind of did a weird thing there. The space race was kind of a good thing, right? I mean,
Yeah, I don't think that it was a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah. So along those same lines, he this guy Itzkoff, his point is that it's for the first time we're going to be actually competing for something that is going to benefit humanity. So that was his point.
All right.
And this guy's actually really big on demilitarizing all these advancements, which is kind of interesting because he has a project that he's working on called Project Avatar. And basically it's to create, it is what it sounds like. It's to create a robot copy of a human that can be operated through a brain computer interface. So basically the brain controlling a machine and, having all the sensations and all these different things that are connected there. What's interesting is that DARPA in the States here, they also have a Project Avatar, but theirs is for a military purpose. They want to be able to, take the human being out of these hostile situations and have these avatars go in and, carry out military missions and, dangerous operations and things like that.
Right.
And so he, this guy's a big advocate of like, hey, let's demilitarize it, make it cheap and available for everybody. So
right. And this is the guy who is talking about uploading our consciousness into computers, basically.
Well, yeah, he's one of them. He's not the other. Well, there's another guy that.
Okay.
that
all right. We'll talk about that other guy.
Yeah. So if you've seen the movie Surrogate, I don't know if you've seen the movie Surrogate. Have you seen it, Basil?
Not me.
Well, it's. I think it was one of those movies that could have been a lot better than it was. But essentially, it's this whole idea of, people having, an avatar type-esque, body that goes out into the public, but you never have to leave the house. Like you get into this like little chair and it kind of interfaces your mind to this machine. And what was really interesting though was that a lot of people use their own image of what they really look like.
Yeah.
But, staying young or whatever,
Right.
But there's a scene in the movie that's really compelling. And I think this was the most compelling part of the film was, they're out and about or whatever. And this guy runs into this woman. And the person that was actually behind the woman was this like slobby man sitting in his like chair at home or whatever.
Right.
So, that creeped me out. And that was the moment of like, wow, that is.
It's sort of how the internet is right now, except for it's going to be out in social life.
Right. It's going to actually be physical interactions. So that just, okay.
Pseudo-physical, I guess.
Pseudo-physical, yeah. But anyway, so that's what this guy's about. But the most alarming aspect of his talk was just his zeal for attaining human immortality by 2045. That's not that long.
Right. Now, what are his ways that he's talking about doing this? I mean, can he medically keep the body alive forever, or what is he talking about there?
I think ultimately he is like everybody else, that a lot of other people, and uploading consciousness, if that's possible. That's like the ultimate goal.
Right.
But they all kind of echo the same procedures of implants than the upload of the consciousness. And with transhumanism, I've found that there's 4 real main categories. There is genetic manipulation.
Right.
There is implants or aesthetics, which is I think going to be the first one that's really gonna because that's the one where it actually helps people. People that have disabilities, people that have, all these various kinds of things that hinder them. It's going to help them come up to par, basically. But the ethical questions is, going beyond that because, and then there's actually the social media aspect of it, which, kind of touched on with the surrogate type thing where, our social lives are going to change when that kind of interface starts to happen. And these are all related, but I'm trying to, organize it into thoughts.
Right.
And then the last one is actually interesting as well, and that's the pharmaceutical implications, because with nanotechnology, with some of these new advances, you're starting to look at new drugs, new kinds of pharmaceuticals that are going to affect various aspects of a person. For example, there's the possibility that people have talked about a memory pill, about, oh, you want to improve your memory. This is going to improve your memory because it's going to stimulate a certain part of your brain. Well,
Right.
it sounds good. There's kind of been stuff like that with, fish oil and stuff like that.
Right.
The more disturbing side of it is, they're trying to actually create stuff where, it erases memory. So let's say you get in a horrible car accident or something. To erase that memory, you take a pill right after it happens, and the actual memory of the event is erased.
Wow.
That's a little bit more frightening.
Yeah. Right.
So, things like that. So the pharmaceutical end of it is also, I think, going to be a very interesting conversation that is going to develop over the next few years here.
Absolutely.
Let me move on here. This is this next guy, Sergei Khrushchevsky. He is a PhD test cosmonaut, professor at the Russian Presidential Academy of National Economy and Public Administration. It's a pretty big title.
Jeez.
Pretty awesome dude, apparently. This guy is very interesting because he's basically talking about how we're going to have to leave Earth someday. That as humans evolve, we're just, the planet's going to die. We're just going to have to move, we're going to have to civilize in the cosmos eventually.
Right.
And so that was kind of his main point. But here's his quote here. He says, "Humans must change. If we want to survive on Earth, much less settled beyond our planet, we will have to become different. In what way? We will have to develop the techniques, the technology, perhaps to transplant our identity to other platforms. We must extend human life because it's in fact disgusting, embarrassing, and unfair to live for only 70 to 80 years, or even less, when there are technologies available that allow you to extend the lifespan to 200 to 300 years." Now, the first thing that caught my attention was the fact that he said, when there's technologies available that allow you to extend life to 200, 300 years.
Yeah.
Is it really available, or is he just kind of speculating? Did he let the cat out of the bag a little early, or is there something there where, because he seems pretty.
Well, here's the thing is I feel if anybody is going to know that this technology exists, it's going to be these guys. These are the guys who are going to know about it. These are probably the guys doing it.
Right.
Now, what I think is interesting and why I think that we don't know about it, or that it's being used, on the public today, you just tie that in with the whole decreasing of the population, the push for the one world government.
Right.
We all know that there's a push to decrease the population. That's why we're all being poisoned, and that's why, regulations are putting psychotic drugs in our water and things like that, and that's a very real thing. Now, if suddenly this technology that sounds like it exists, this came out and now everybody's living forever, this would totally put a wrench in the gears of the global elite and their plans for decreasing the population. So that's why I think that we have not heard about it, but I think I'm not surprised in the least that he knows about it and that it exists at all.
Yeah, it's a very alarming thing that he's hinting this, because it's
and one more thing is that I think it's funny because I'm not sure if he was thinking about exactly who he was saying it to. He was saying it to his colleagues.
Right.
He's saying it to a group of people at this conference who probably all know that the technology exists as well.
Right.
But, sometimes you just don't think about, some people are going to put this on a podcast and it's going to be talked about across the world in America.
Right. And it would explain why he's so kind of infuriated about it. It's disgusting and embarrassing and unfair to only live 70 and 80 years when we have the technology to live longer.
Right.
It's just really bizarre.
It's obviously something he's passionate about.
Yeah.
He's probably not thinking long term and half a world away when he said it.
Right.
When he let the cat out of the bag. But anyways, continue.
Yeah, so that's basically what I found interesting about his little speech. But, it really does kind of reflect on some biblical truths about, why is they obviously fear death. I mean, the Christians and religious folks always get accused of like, oh, you just fear death. It's a crutch.
Right.
But I mean, obviously these people must fear death much more because they're working so hard to, not die, basically.
Yeah.
So, I just think it actually proves, if anything, biblical truth about death. But did you have any thoughts about that, or are you?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that the people, obviously, these people have no concept of a soul, or maybe that's unfair to say, but
they might, but it's unlikely.
But if they're working towards this transhumanism, they might not be in the same mindset as us, being based on these ancient scriptures that were given to us, long ago, who are now prophesying everything that's happening. So they see this as an expansion and a good thing for humanity. They don't see the whole picture. They don't see how these pieces are fitting into the puzzle.
Right.
So of course they're going to try to live forever.
Yeah.
Of course, if they don't think that they're already going to live forever, if they don't have a soul that's eternal, they're going to try to live forever, because these are the guys who believe that is the next step for humanity. They're not okay with where humanity is right now. Yeah,
and from their worldview, death is the end. So they don't want this to end. So
absolutely
makes sense. So that's that. The next guy, Anders Sandberg. He's a researcher, science debater, futurist, transhumanist, and author. Now, this is the gentleman that we actually played a clip from. He's the guy that was interviewed in Transhuman, Do You Want to Live Forever? And I think a couple episodes ago, we actually played the clip from the preview of that movie where he talks about, how he wants to wake up in a computer.
Right.
So, he kind of talks about how, obviously the same kind of thing, but let me read his quote here. He says, our biological conditions as humans is certainly not bad. It's nice to be human. It's nice to be alive, but we could be healthier. We can live longer. And there are various ways of doing that. But in the end, biotechnological means of extending human capacity are limited by the limitations of biology. And I do think that we are going to enhance ourselves using artificial means. At first, and this is kind of where I think he lays out the plans.
This is great. This guy's in the face of all these other guys who are talking about enhancing the human body to live forever, and let's make this human body live forever. And this guy's in the face of these gentlemen saying, that's not enough.
Yeah, basically. And here's how he sees it. He goes, at first, there may be implants, but in the longer run, by transferring our consciousness to machines, if that's technically possible, and I do think this is a very important development that are going to affect our economy, our society, and our view of the world over this century. And I agree with him largely. I mean, I think it will affect our economy and our society and the view of the world.
I don't think anybody could argue with that.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting that he brings in that sociological aspect of, and at least I'm glad he understands that. I'm glad he understands that this has an impact in those things. And he's not really clear whether. I mean, obviously, I think he believes it's going to be a positive thing for humanity.
Right. This being the transfer of the consciousness into computers.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. And okay. Now, do I have permission to start this here?
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay.
Just go.
So a few episodes ago, if you've been listening, if not, go back and check it out. We talked about the soul catcher chip.
Right.
All right. The soul catcher chip implanted in the brain attempting to record memories and being able to see everything out of the host's eye.
Right.
Okay, so now this guy is talking about first it will start with implants, and then it will move on to actually uploading consciousness into electronics. Okay, so let's just start with the chip called Soul Catcher. Okay, we talked about Soul Catcher a few episodes ago, and you know, the name kind of was a little strange, considering that, you know, it's really just catching memories, it's just catching your
Right.
you know, your visions and things like that. But now you think about this connected with this guy's statements, starting with implants, moving on to uploading your consciousness into a computer. Now, there's a lot about the beast, all right? If you guys aren't Mark of the Beast, if you guys aren't familiar with that, it's a biblical reference to a mark that will be either on your hand or your forearm or your head or something like that, or your head, implanted in your head that everybody will more or less be forced to do, and if you refuse, you'll be killed, and it's basically a tool of the Antichrist to be used for that. So now think about this. The Soul Catcher chip is in your head. It's recording your memories. It's recording everything. Now suddenly it comes across that now it's time to upload your consciousness into the government's computers, or the computer, or whoever, or the one world government probably at this point. And so now there is no death. Once your consciousness is in the computer of the leaders of this world, the ruler of this world,
right?
You cannot die on your own. You cannot kill yourself. Now you're enslaved basically by this computer. Your consciousness is there eternally until it's erased by whoever's controlling it. Now, who is the ruler of this world? It's Satan. Literally Satan will have your soul inside of a computer. Now, this is just my commentary. This isn't written down anywhere, but this is just me connecting the dots.
Right.
You know? And so you have this chip called the Soul Catcher.
Yeah.
And that moves into uploading your consciousness into a computer that you no longer are able to die. Your soul cannot be released. Your consciousness is in the computer. You're no longer able to go to heaven. And that's where we come into that was the whole thing when I was younger about, well, don't take the mark of the beast because then you're signing yourself to Satan, or that's the basis of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, in your head you're like, well, that sucks. Because then what? We won't be able to bank. We won't be able to
buy or trade.
We won't be able to live in society. Why are we Christians not allowed to do that? I don't get it, God. Well, because it's not just about that. Now you are literally giving your soul to this computer that now you are no longer able to die. Your consciousness is no longer able to stop. And therefore, I mean, in the way that I see it, you can't go to heaven if you can't die. And so you're literally giving your soul to the ruler of this world.
Yeah. And there's biblical scriptures that talk about, people will be seeking death, but not find it. And I just think this is just it also says in scriptures that, knowledge will increase, biblical knowledge will increase as time goes on to, closer to the end. And this could be one of those examples of people in the first century weren't going to understand computer consciousness upload. They're not going to get that. But as we kind of see stuff unfolding, it's interesting to speculate. We're not saying that this is what's going to happen, but, in light of where technology is going, I would say it's plausible. It's definitely a possibility.
and it fits into my biblical understanding
Right,
of
right.
of what's going on. It connects dots that never made sense to me before.
Yeah.
And now looking at these things and gradually learning more about the reality of the world around us and where it is heading, that are just lining up so nightmarishly with the prophecies of the Old and New Testament.
Yeah.
And
Well,
and
go ahead.
well, yeah, and I'm just saying that, it's connecting with things that didn't quite make sense.
Yeah.
We all have these things where, we believe it because it's just part of our thing, and that's what we do, and we're told that, and it makes sense to us a little bit, so we just do it, and we learn it, and we prepare ourselves. But now here is, in my mind, the reason why. God does not tell us things just because.
He's not a cosmic police officer.
Exactly.
He's not a cosmic pre-crime preventative.
Exactly. Everything he does is literally for our own good, whether we don't understand it or not at the time. Well, now it's all starting to make sense in my mind. Do not take the mark of the beast. Why? Not because I won't be able to go to 7-Eleven, buy a Slurpee, but because it will literally be implanted in my head, capture my memories, eventually be able to transfer my soul into a computer, and I will be seeking death, and I will not find it.
Yeah, and also, passages of Jesus talking about, if he doesn't put an end to this, no flesh shall survive. It just puts a whole new spin on no flesh shall survive,
Right.
Because before, there has been commentary about like, oh, there's just going to be so much war and so much, whatever. But this is a whole new level of like, okay, maybe really no flesh shall survive really means like really like no flesh because everyone's in a computer.
Exactly. By our own making.
By our own decision.
We are sloughing off this goo that God put us in, and we are putting ourselves into these pristine machines that we believe are the future of our species, when really we are just killing our species.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Well, I have a couple more here, and
All right.
actually 3 more, and it just gets more and more interesting. And this one is, if you've studied transhumanism at all, you will know the name Nick Bostrom. He was one of the speakers there. He is a PhD professor of Oxford University, and he's the co-founder of the World Transhumanist Association. And I know Tom Horn has done extensive work kind of documenting some of the stuff he's said. But this, I mean, it ties into what we just talked about a little bit, but this is just so blatantly obvious of where this guy's headed, and at least what he sees is coming in the near future. So let me quote him here. He says, "Now, one concept that is useful, I think, in thinking about long-term futures for humanity's the notion of the single tongue, which should be a world order, where at the highest level of organization, there is only one decision-making entity. Now, that decision-making entity could be any of a wide range of certain structures. It could be a world democratic government. It could be a dictator. It could be a super intelligent machine. It could be perhaps even a universal moral code that had provisions for its law enforcement. But both good and bad structures could count as a single tongue. But the unifying feature will be that they all have the ability to solve global coordination problems. For example, to avoid arms races, or to solve these global common problems like when we have different countries spearing out pollutants into the atmosphere, or overfishing the oceans. Now all these kinds of coordination problems that arise from the lack of a single decision-making entity on top." So basically he's just saying,
going back to Babel.
Yeah, going back to Babel, one world government. It's going to solve our problems.
But not only that, one language.
One language, yeah.
And this is another thing that we mentioned in another episode was, just this whole concept of a one world government, the whole concept of Babel, the whole concept of this entire thing is the antithesis of what I see is the value in the human race, at least at some level,
Yeah.
because at some level, I mean, okay, Babel was a bad thing.
Right.
Okay. Babel was man who had decided that they had enough of God, and now we come together, and now we are, and this happened just naturally. At the beginning of the human race, we are all kind of in the same place.
Right.
And we all spoke the same language because that's just where we were. We all did that. And then, through making some poor decisions and picking some fights that we couldn't quite handle, that's where we are dispersed and the other languages came about. And that's sort of where this whole tapestry of the human race started. Well, now there's this whole push to get back to Babel or Babylon. And it's just another thing that makes me uncomfortable because, a one world language, I get it. I mean, we basically already sort of operate as English as the one world language when it comes to business and when it comes to,
Right.
all sorts of media. And it's sort of already there. And when this started to happen, people were saying the same thing. But now when it all seems so tangible and these deadlines or these projections that these guys are putting on all of this stuff is no longer just in the future there will be a one world government.
Right.
Like it was in the 50s and the 60s and 70s. I mean, and the 80s with George Bush Sr. They are all talking about, the one world government will come. Well, now we have people actually putting dates on this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And with the one world language thing, I mean, Microsoft just came out with a universal translator. Basically, you speak into something, a machine or whatever, or microphone, and it spits out in your voice, apparently, is what it's claiming to do, a different language. So, I mean, obviously technology taking precedence with this kind of stuff, again, is...
Oh, absolutely.
It's just a very interesting topic to be looking into, and as far as I'm concerned, it's.
What's funny is this. It reminds me of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And there was a little fish that existed in the universe, and what happens if I remember correctly? If I'm not remembering this correctly, somebody please correct me in the comments below. They would put the fish and it would wriggle into your ear. And then when that fish would live in your ear, and then whatever language would come into your head or come into your ears, the fish would translate it for you. And so you could understand any language in the universe. Now, what I think is funny and ironic is that in the book, this fish was the number one, it was the evidence that God did exist. This was the evidence as to why God existed, because there is no scientific explanation or reason for this fish to exist. And and I just thought that was a funny comparison when you start thinking about everybody returning to a one world language and having these translators and things like that.
So are you saying we're going to have a fish jump in our ear? And
that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying be ready for it.
Be ready for the fish.
2013 little fish in your ear.
Fish epidemic. Okay, we're getting tired, but it's been a long day. Okay, so let's move on here. There's a couple more here, and Alexander Panoff, astrophysicist, author of Snooks Panoff Curve, which describes the singularity. Mm-hmm. And he basically, I mean, when I read this little portion here, I mean, just red lights went off, and I'm like, Antichrist, Antichrist, Antichrist. That's just what I got from it. But I'm going to read this quote here. He says, "As a scientist and astrophysicist, I'm worried primarily about the future of science. This is what we can say about the future of science in the post-singularity stage. First, we can make a few general philosophical propositions. Any progressive phenomenon in evolution cannot be progressive forever, as leaders in evolution replace each other. In this sense, science is a typical progressive phenomenon. It arose in response to certain crises and served to overcome them. So science, in this quality, as the basis of the formation of the vector of the development of human civilization, cannot lead forever. From this, it follows that a change in leadership will take place, and another leader must come to replace science, a leader about which we do not yet know anything about.
Oh my gosh.
And I read that and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this guy is just totally setting up this leader. The language is just so, it almost echoes some of these esoteric writers, which is what I found very interesting, because and we've mentioned the names before, and I think these names will come up again. Helena Blavatsky, Manly P. Hall, Albert Pike, these Alice Bailey, these occult writers who had spirits kind of channel whatever information to them to write stuff. They have kind of similar types of language, like the way they speak about this coming leader or this coming deity or this ascended master that's going to come, whatever language they use, it's very similar. And that's what alarmed me about this.
Well, here's what I find very interesting about this. And it's just weird to sort of observe the different levels that are happening simultaneously. Yeah. So on one hand, we have the people pushing for a technocratic society, a society literally ruled by science.
Yes.
And it's something that people have fantasized about for years. Since
the 30s.
Exactly. And this sort of, dominance of, logic and reason, which, don't get me wrong, logic and reason are wonderful things.
Yes.
I use them every day. But this longing for science to rule, because science will be our savior and science will make everything right and science will unite us as human beings and science will do this. And then this guy comes along and says, science will be that, but then we must have this mystery leader come across. And so you listen to this and you're like, okay, are you the Antichrist? Do these people have they ever heard of the concept of the Antichrist?
I don't know, but it would be very interesting to have conversations with some of these people.
Absolutely.
From a biblical perspective. But
right. Well, that's exactly my point is, shoot. I mean, really, I'm getting all worked up again. And it really is just so self-evident. I don't need to scream it at you guys, so I apologize for that.
Well, really, you're just screaming it at me, so.
I am.
I'm just kidding.
Just like the guy in the conference, I just need to keep in mind that other people will be listening to this, and it's not just you. So
I know. Well, let me read a quote from, and I had this prepared. This is from a pamphlet called Technocracy in Plain Terms, and it was actually published by Technocracy Incorporated in 1939. Okay, so this is a long time ago, 80 years.
Technocracy Incorporated in 1939. Is that what you
39? Yeah. This is the first decade or so when technocracy was big hit in the United States. So, and it's just a very short quote here. It says, the word itself, technocracy, signifies a new, purely scientific form of social management which is based solely on scientific principles and incontrovertible scientific facts. Technocracy is the application of science to the social order. So that's kind of the overview. I mean, it's a very concise way of looking at what technocracy is.
Right.
And it's not socialism, it's not communism, it's something else, but it's got the same kind of effect of like everyone kind of falls under this, mandate, and everyone gets the same amount of food, and
Right. Well, something that I find interesting, and I just thought about this, I didn't think about it before, is this guy. I mean, don't get me wrong. I am not saying that this man is a prophet. That is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is what he is saying is sort of prophetic in the way that it kind of gives us a timeline.
Yeah, like a roadmap.
A roadmap,
Signpost.
And don't get me wrong. I don't know. We don't know the hour. We don't know the day.
Yeah.
But we know the time. And what this guy is saying is, first there will be technocracy,
Right.
which is something we all see. I mean, that's our whole point. Technocracy is coming.
It's already kind of here, but
Yeah. One world government is here. That sort of stuff. But then he says, then comes one leader of which we have no idea. And
it's going to replace science, and
science.
all those verses in the Bible about this one that performs counterfeit signs and miracles and wonders and all this stuff. I mean, what can there be that is that portrays wonders and all these miracles and stuff, unless it like defies science to the core?
Right.
You know what I mean? If science gets to a point where it is just so, they think they understand everything, and then somebody comes in and just has control over it, what are people going to think about that? They're obviously going to believe that this person has some kind of godly or supernatural power, and so it just plays into all of those verses that we see in scripture. And I don't know if there's that many people making the connection of the Global Future 2045 Congress and the Bible, but it's there,
right.
It's there, and that's why we're here and talking about it. But let me jump into this last quote here.
Do it.
So this is Barry Rodrigue. He's the professor at the University of Southern Maine, co-chairman of the Global Future 2045, and
So we have an American now.
Yeah, and he wrote what's called the Manifesto for a New Millennium, a working agenda for the Anthropocene, Anthropocene, and I had to look up what that word means, and Wikipedia basically defined it as in a recent the Anthropocene is a recent and informal geologic. There you go. All right. Yeah. Anthropocene. Okay. There you go. Is a recent and informal geologic chronological term that serves to mark the evidence and extent of human activities that have had a significant global impact on the Earth's ecosystem. So that's what that is. And so anyway, he wrote this manifesto for a new millennium, and in his speech he talks about, well, let me just quote him. He says, quote, "There needs to be global mechanisms for review and regulation. A significant danger lies in wildcat and irresponsible implementation of technology and other forms of innovation without understanding the consequences, or the ignoring of those consequences in order to obtain higher financial profits. This is especially true given the potentially devastating and rapid nature of genetic engineering and nanotechnology. Therefore, in tandem with technological innovation, we need innovation of social mechanisms to manage them." And so far, he's bright. I mean, he understands that there are risks involved with, we can't just blindly start doing genetic engineering and nanotechnology and all this stuff.
Right.
It's got to be mandated to some degree, which is, again, it might just play right into the hands of a new world order. But it goes on here. This leaves the only chance for such a paradigm shift in the hands of those who can assemble ideas for renovation and effectively disseminate them on a global scale most quickly and most deeply. It requires global cooperation of scholars and scientists, business and civic leaders, citizens and workers, the poorest outcasts, and the wealthiest elites. Yeah, that's going to happen. Philosophers and spiritual leaders, community activists, and many others. Therefore, a new partnership is required. And, again, that just echoes technocracy right there. A lot of the, other than the poorest outcasts, these scientists and scholars working together to formulate a social plan.
So what exactly is he going for here?
Well, here's the kicker. Okay, here's the punchline.
All right.
How do we make this happen? What is the process we must follow? And he kind of comments, we've had brilliant ideas and innovations presented at the Moscow Congress of Global Futures 2045. These innovations are very exciting and very important, but the big question is, how do we link them? How do we promote them? How do we popularize them in such a fashion that we create a new world consciousness, a new world civilization, in what my friend David Hook calls global enlightenment?
There it is.
There it is. So
There it is.
he is basically saying we need to change we need to have a system that is going to inundate the public into accepting this paradigm shift, what he calls a new world consciousness, a new world civilization,
Right.
global enlightenment. I can't get over the fact that they have these good points about like what, these are scientific minded people, and then they use words that are the same words that are used by these esoteric authors. I don't know. It just blows my mind.
Right. Yeah, it makes an obvious connection between these scientists and these esoteric teachings.
Yeah.
It definitely shows that they are connected in the whole scheme. What I do also think is interesting is, these things sound great. I mean, he's talking about saving the earth, saving everybody, including the poor man with the rich man, all deciding what needs to happen.
Right.
And so it sort of beckons this utopian outlook, but at the same time, it's almost like he's backhandedly talking about tricking people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's hard because you listen to his words and they sound good, but then suddenly it's not about that anymore.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's about this one consciousness, and it's about it's just demonstrably obvious that the poor man cannot sit beside the world global elite and make decisions with them.
That's just not going to happen.
It just makes no sense. I mean, it's like a nice thing to say, I guess, in idea, but he is a smart guy.
Yeah.
He knows that that's not the case.
Yeah.
And I do think that one of the most interesting things about this is, these are scientists who are, not religious theological guys. They're obviously tuned into this new age push for, one world consciousness and this whole thing. So,
yeah,
you just don't know who you can trust anymore, I guess.
Yeah, I think if anything, this is just a clear indication that this whole idea of a new world order and globalization is not just a political agenda anymore. It is a technological, scientific thing, and it's just converging. It's just accelerating. It's just consuming all sectors. And obviously, a lot of people have looked at the political side of things. It's people have done that for the last 20 years now, and a lot this last 10 years,
right,
with the internet. But now we're seeing it happen in the scientific, technological realm. We know it's happening slowly but surely in the religious realm. When you look at ecumenical movements, when you look at the call for, like a global religion,
right.
There hasn't been anything deliberate, but you see these tolerance stickers and stuff like that quite obviously are pushing for a compromise in people's faiths to merge and to get along and all this stuff, which is very interesting. It's another rabbit trail that we won't go down right now, but
right,
it's just converging. Everything is coming together, and it's all in the name of peace. It's all kind of it's all under the guise of like it's going to better us, it's going to make us progress and things like that. And
let's make it clear. We are not saying that because it comes under the guise of peace. We're not against peace.
Right.
We're not
exactly.
We're not saying like
we got to clarify that because
peace. This is a bunch of bull hockey. That's not where this comes from. The reason that the guise of peace is so important is because it was written thousands of years ago.
Yeah, and
that's how it was going to work.
Exactly. And this is a prime example here. I'm going to read from Daniel 8:23 and 8:25, and I'll break down the verse to help kind of understand what's going on here. So Daniel 8:23 says, "In the latter period of their rule, when transgressors have run their course, a king will rise, insolent and skilled in intrigue." So let me break down some of those words for you. The word there for insolent, so this king is going to rise. He's going to have insolent and skilled in intrigue. Insolent is the Hebrew word az, which means strong. And it's derived from the word azaz, which means prevail. So he's going to be this kind of strong character person. Skilled is the Hebrew word chada, which means riddle or enigma. He's going to have,
he's going to be mysterious.
He's going to have this, hold on. Did I say this wrong? Yeah. Did I say intrigue? I'm really tired. Sorry. This is very late. Intrigue is, did I say intrigue? Okay, never mind. Let me go back up here. Insolent, as, which means strong. Skilled is bin. Sorry, this is where I messed up. Skilled is the Hebrew word bin, B-I-N, which means to understand. So he's going to be strong, and he's going to understand intrigue, which is chada, which means riddle or enigma. Okay, so this king is going to be strong, and he's going to understand the riddles, the enigmas, the world's mysteries, the things of this universe that are not understood. And this plays right into the hands of what that guy said earlier about this ruler taking over science.
Right.
When you really think about it, so I found that interesting. And so in Daniel 8:25,
he'll be able to come in and answer the questions that science still isn't able to answer.
Exactly. It's going to replace science. This new unknown leader. And then Daniel 8:25 says, "And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many." And the word policy there is sekel, S-E-K-E-L, which means insight, shrewdness, intelligence, wisdom. And so through his intelligence, his wisdom, he's going to cause craft. The word craft just means deceit. To prosper in his hand. And by peace, shalva, which means at ease or to prosper or prosperity, he's going to destroy many. So he's going to actually come in and through his insight, his wisdom, his intelligence, just this crafty person, he is going to deceive and use peace as the ultimate point of his destruction of people.
Right.
And that's why we're kind of saying, what's going on with all this talk about not just the global government, but just, leaders coming in, taking over. It just seems like it echoes what these people in the transhumanist world community are talking about. Just seems to echo these things a little bit too much for me. And that's why we just want to get it out there and just say, hey, you know what? Proceed with caution. Really think things through, which obviously it's kind of too late to do that. I think they're moving forward with their plan. But then for each one of us individually, we can do things to prepare spiritually, to get right with God, and all these other things that ultimately, science is not going to save us. As much as people rely on science and technology and stuff like that, it's not going to save humanity in the full scope of saving and perfection that we desire in our human hearts. We kind of desire this, because I think each one of us, and even these people who are transhumanists, understand that there is this lack, there is this flaw in character and humanity, and they're trying to solve it through technology and science. And it's just really sad almost from this perspective of, it seems like there's been an answer for 2,000 years.
Right. Right.
So.
Exactly.
So I think we've rambled on for quite a while here. So if you're still around, kudos to you, because that was an agenda there.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, thanks again, guys, for sticking around. Again, if you have any comments or questions or anything, please go down to the comment section. Do it. Send us an email. Go to our contact tab. Let us know what you think. We love to hear from you. Make sure to go to Twitter. Follow us at Canary Cry Radio. Search us on Facebook, Canary Cry Radio. Like our fan page. That would be great. And yeah. Thanks again for
email
coming
us, canarycryradio@gmail.com. You can email us there, and
good old email.
Yeah, sure it's tracked by now.
All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in, guys. And make sure to check back for more episodes, and make sure to check the show notes, check out the articles, and
stay tuned for guests, because we will probably have a guest in the next few episodes here.
Guests.
Have a good one.